Welcome, Regina. I'm with
Hi,
Regina
Debbie.
Hourigan. Hi. Regina Hourigan is a mentor with the Mentor Project, but she works at Colgate-Palmolive. So let me tell you a little bit about Regina. Regina is a manager in strategic innovations and technology alliances for Colgate-Palmolive. Her current role is focused on developing and embedding innovative capabilities for R&D and beyond at Colgate. Her degree is in chemical engineering from Cooper Union. Regina is highly skilled as a facilitator with training from synectics, creative problem solving, and executive education from the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford University. She has customer-focused innovation, leadership, and risk-taking and design thinking skills. She is a holder of 5 patents and an author of 2 book chapters. So, Regina, you have an amazing background, and I can't wait to hear more about it. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do as a strategic innovations and technology alliance manager for Colgate?
Sure, of course, Debbie. And first, I want to say thanks for having me. It's really an honor, and it's great to be part of this program. What is a strategic innovation manager? It sounds a little bit fuzzy, right? What I actually do is I help bring in innovative ways of working into Colgate, specifically for the R&D teams. So when you think about research and development, that's what R&D stands for. A big part of their role is to come up with breakthrough ideas. And scientists are amazing. They're very curious. They look into different areas for new leads, and they're great at experimentation. So that is kind of rooted in who they are and how they problem solve. So my role, which I think I have the best job in Colgate, is to take all of that curiosity and passion and give it some shape and some structure and some sort of proven ways to come up with really great ideas. And my job is really to find those techniques and tools, pilot them, which means try them out, and then launch them in the community of scientists. And I've done that for a few different programs. Some of them have been around communicating science. So how do you get your great scientific message across? That could be to consumers, the people that use our products at Colgate, or it could be to our marketing partners who might be non-technical. And then there's also, around problem solving, different strategies and how you do ideation, or what's sometimes called brainstorming.
Wow, that's a lot. That sounds really exciting. I didn't know that exists. So
I know.
pretty cool. But you have a degree in chemical engineering.
That's correct.
First I'm going to ask what got you interested in going to school for engineering, but then I want to know how that led to you getting the current job that you have. So first,
Sure.
What got you interested?
So yeah, what got me interested in the chemical engineering, I think at a very young age, I was lucky enough to be exposed to a lot of science around my house. So, we were the family that would, be tinkering and taking things apart and playing with mercury in our driveway, which I do not recommend. But we had, a lot of access to different materials because my dad was a plumber. So we were always sort of interested in taking things apart, fixing things, and exploring the world that way. So what got me into chemical engineering, which I had no idea that existed as a child. It's not something I was exposed to. I didn't know any engineers. It was simply a magazine article, which I still to this day think is amazing how one thing can impact you. I was, I think, in school, and they had a subscription to like a weekly science publication that was pretty accessible in terms of how easy it was to read. And they talked about a chemical engineer who developed plastic particles that would soak up oil during oil spills, and then you could collect these particles and I guess clean them and then reuse them. I have no idea if that technology still exists, but what I really liked about that was the idea that you could kind of, these materials that I found very interesting and chemistries that I found very interesting, you could apply them to a problem that in my mind was really significant. So that sparked, I think, my interest in what is engineering. And there was a couple other great moments later after that where I got to meet engineers or at least hear them speak. When I was in 8th grade, I went to a I think it was called, it's hard to remember what it was called, but it was a panel of different scientists talking about their professions, and there was an engineer there. So that kind of just made it more real. And then when I went into high school, I just loved science and math and found out, which schools had engineering programs.
Wow. So it was really just exposure, not from
Yeah.
any specific teacher or mentor, but from uh, an article. That's pretty cool. And then
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
school in eighth grade. I love it. That's awesome. How how do you use your chemical engineering skills now that you're doing something quite different?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I get that asked a lot because what I do today is very different than when I started my career, which was in process engineering, worked in manufacturing plants and scaling up batches, to today when I work on what we call innovation capabilities. I actually had a lot of my career in science and research and development and launched several products. And during that time, I think what made the shift was really not something internally driven. I wasn't someone who said, oh, I want to go and do innovation capabilities. I didn't really know what it was. The shift happened because people noticed this sort of overlap I have in problem solving of creativity and analytical skills. And that overlap, I think, is part of my superpower set of what I'm good at. It's, making connections when things seem very different. And so mentors and different leaders here at my work at Colgate noticed that, and they encouraged me to try out this role that we had around innovation capabilities, which I'll tell you, I didn't even necessarily think I would be good at or enjoy, but I was curious about it. And so I went for it. I took the leap. But what I've learned since taking the leap is there's actually a lot of overlap in engineering and how we are. Engineering at its core is like seeing a problem and stepping in and fixing it and applying a lot of knowledge to fix it. So it's not too dissimilar from what I do in this space, which is how do you apply different strategies of problem solving to really hard, complex problems? And how do you guide a group of people through a problem solving effort, which takes some additional skills, but not necessarily drastically different ones.
It's like you're a psychologist for engineering.
Yeah.
Did you learn these skills from specific training at Stanford University? I know that you did get training at Stanford University in
Right.
customer-focused innovation. Did you go to Stanford and decide, hey, I'm going to get this training? How did that happen?
That's right. Yeah. So I've been fortunate enough to have opportunities to go over to Stanford and work specifically with the D School about maybe 3 times going over there. And one fantastic experience where they came out here and worked with us at Colgate. And, that sort of how they approach problem solving at the D School profoundly impacted my work and my role. They advocate for how do you really understand the user and the problem that they're having and what's their need and what's their motivation before you jump into finding a solution. So that customer focused innovation course that you mentioned, that training, gets attended by many business leaders, but also leaders in the military and academics and, a broad range of different fields, because the idea is anybody has a customer, essentially. And if you can focus yourself in what are their needs and, fall in love with what they need and really be inspired by trying to solve for something for them, well, then the solutions you create are much more meaningful to them at the end. We're engineers, like I mentioned, we're really good at solving problems, but we're not always the best at exploring what is the problem. So I got that training really out there at Stanford, where they teach you how to do interviews with customers, and they teach you how to take those interviews and turn those into problem statements, and then how to do rapid ideating, which is like brainstorming, prototyping, and testing, all really in a very iterative, fast way of working that it's just, again, profoundly impacted how I work, and a big advocate for how we can do that more often here at Colgate.
I think this is so cool. I never imagined engineering to look like this. It's completely different than I visualized, which was, a lab coat and sitting doing something, with pipettes or things like that, or even, big materials. This is really cool. I see that you have 5 patents. That's amazing to me in itself. Can you tell me what they're in and can you tell me about them?
Oh, thanks, Debbie. Yeah, it's all of those I got granted while I was working at Colgate. I have other applications, so those are granted patents. Um, those came out of work I did in formulation space. So at Colgate, I've worked in different brands and different formulations. So all of our soaps or body washes or toothpaste start at the lab bench. And when you create a formula that is particularly unique and novel and new to the world, you can apply for a patent, and Colgate applies for those patents to really protect our unique formulations and things that we want to kind of have a competitive advantage over our competition by keeping them unique and formulas that only we can make for, as long as the patent is in existence. So my 5 patents are all in what we call personal care. So that's a cleansing type of product. And those are all new formulations that I've created for bar soaps particularly, or improvements on bar soap formulations. So, like Irish Spring is a bar soap, is a brand of ours. Outside the United States, Palmolive is a brand. So these are patents that strengthen our unique formulations. Like, for example, one of them is how to make a bar soap last longer, and materials that I, through screening, identified that would help a bar soap last longer. And that was unique enough to get a patent granted, and it was something that we could include in the formulas.
That's so cool. These are things that I take for granted every day, but who
Yeah,
who doesn't want their
yeah.
bar of soap to last longer? That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a tremendous, I've been lucky enough and just in the way that my career developed, I had an internship in Estee Lauder when I was in college, and I worked at L'Oreal and Colgate, and the science and development between, like in our everyday products in our bathrooms, is just really interesting. And like I've been fortunate enough to work on a ton of different products, and I'm always fascinated by the ingredients and the formulas and kind of like what every ingredient does in our formulation. And when it's well designed, it's very purpose driven, and it's really quite elegant.
I love it because it is true. It's exciting to know what's in our products and how they work
Yeah,
and that they aren't just thrown together haphazardly. There's a lot of thought that
exactly.
goes into them. What's it like being a woman in the engineering field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot about this. I think from what I've read, I'm active here. There's a women's network here at Colgate that I'm active in. I have daughters. I'm very passionate and interested in women in science and engineering. And one thing I've heard that it's somehow based in research, and I couldn't cite the research, is that girls and women view the careers in science as not necessarily collaborative sometimes. And I almost want to just debunk that really quickly, because me being a woman in engineering, especially in the fields that I am in, and the experiences I've personally had, have been tremendously collaborative. And I've been surrounded here at Colgate by really great women leaders that, continue to inspire me. And even when I was in chemical engineering school back in university, my class, and I don't know how this worked out or if it's particularly rare, but my class of chemical engineers, we were about 50% female. So for me, I've had probably a fairly uneventful noticing my gender in engineering because I've been surrounded by women. My first boss were women. My, second, third, fourth boss, I think I've only had one gentleman as a boss in my career. So it's really been maybe a one-off, but my perspective is the more that we can show role models where it's something that is a fit for girls and especially in engineering and science, we should be doing more and more of that. I hope that I am one of those people as well.
Do you have any recommendations for kids who may have never even thought of engineering, or maybe who have?
Oh, that's such a great question. I guess it's find one thing for me was, sometimes you'd be surprised who your family knows, and maybe it's something as simple as like asking your family, like, do you know a friend of a friend who's an engineer or a scientist? And put the word out through your family network and have them tap into their friend network. And if they find someone who is a scientist or engineer, have a little chat with them, ask your parents to invite them over to your home. And, especially if someone through your family, and have them tell a little bit about their school, what they did in college, and what they do now. My husband and I, we went over to kind of similarly, it was like a friend and their son was interested in engineering, and we went over for like a Saturday afternoon to have coffee, and he had a list of questions, which I would also recommend to kids. Have a list of questions, and we answered his questions like really candidly, and it turned out he went into like an engineering camp, and now he's older now, and he's looking at maybe going to college for engineering. And we still sometimes text about it, which I think is interesting, and she'll give us like a little update, and she'll say, your conversation really had an impact on him. And of course, to me and my husband, it was not a lot for us to go and have a chat. So again, to the kids who are interested in engineering and might not know quite what it is, like try to ask through your friends and family network and have a conversation.
That's very good advice. I hope kids will also reach out to the Mentor Project and ask questions there as well. But that is very good advice, because a friend or family member is going to have your best interests at heart. So
absolutely,
that's really good advice. I can't thank you enough for sharing your time. Do you have any takeaway that you'd like to give to those who are listening?
I just want to, remind everyone to take action where they can. I mean, the Mentor Project has set up a lot of great ways for, you to ask a question or watch a video or find someone who can, be a role model for you. So just take full advantage of that and take actions wherever you can to learn more and continue to explore it.
Thank you so much, Regina.
Yeah. Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate it. It's great.
I just